Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back. You're listening to Unity FM 93.5. I am Shalene Ali, and joining me is my guest Ray Douglas. Assalamu alaikum, brother. Okay, so we're discussing this great event that you've got coming up, Deenagers.
Yeah.
You said when is it you're officially going to be launching this? Because I think you said it was Birmingham,
in about 48 hours.
London, Manchester.
Yeah.
Hold on, you were on Islam Channel, wasn't you?
Last week, yeah.
Yeah, okay, and you were announcing that.
Yeah. I was just generally talking about youth violence as an issue, but because obviously I work with all communities, Muslim and non-Muslim.
Yeah.
My background is Afro-Caribbean. So, I think what's happened is, because this is one of my big kind of, we have a situation out there now where you have a lot of young Muslims who are taking on the negative aspects of specific cultures, all right?
Yeah.
The way they dress, the way they walk, the way they talk, and yeah, that's youth culture, and there's not a problem with it per se, but the issue for me is that a lot of the culture that they're taking on, you'll find that a lot of people from my community, we look down on that. We don't, it's no longer the stereotype of young black men blasting the music in the car. It's now the Muslims.
Yeah.
It's no longer, young black men selling crack cocaine. You look at a community like this, an area like this, the majority Muslim communities, who's selling the heroin? It's not young black men. Yeah. It's not young white men. It's predominantly young Pakistani men.
And you know this because you
knows it.
You visit prisons.
It's prisons. Yeah, it's a taboo. It's one of our taboos, and we're very, very good at as a community in not addressing it.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, I remember I had Martin Glynn on the show, and he's a criminologist, and what he said was that when he attended prisons was that he would often have Muslims reach out to him and seek knowledge from him, and I think, wow, this is where I think Deenagers is going to be fantastic and really effective, inshallah, because you are going into that gap that there, that nobody can address at the moment, and you've had the experience, what is on their minds, what needs to be addressed. So yeah.
I mean,
say something.
If you have a young person at the moment who's been involved in the criminal justice system,
yeah,
and they come out, who do they go to? Apart from their probation, who do they go to? What structure is in place in Birmingham for a young person coming out of prison? What structure is in place for someone who's involved in, who's got an ISSP, which is essentially wearing a tag?
Yeah.
How do we create windows of transformation? If you look at, we all know the story of Malcolm X. Malcolm X was, in his 30s, essentially, when he turned we know the power of the Deen.
Yeah. We
know that someone can go from being, totally in disaffection to becoming a leader.
Yeah.
This is how powerful this religion is. Yeah. And this whole, that, how do you create that epiphany? So one of we're going to address the marginalized, but also those involved in the criminal justice system, because, you see when you go and work in prisons, with 10% of the prison population, that's a massive, massive number.
Yeah.
So when you go there, you see a lot of brothers, on their Deen.
Yeah.
And I assume it's the same within the women prisons as well. But when they exit that gate, if the correct support mechanism and all the research around it, coming out of, for example, Cambridge University, that I've spoke about, people embracing faith within the secure state or within prison, evidence suggests that when they come out, if the infrastructure is not in place, they will quite often return back to their own ways, old ways, and reoffend. And we're talking about, recidivism here. So, where did they go? In a big major city like Birmingham, why is there no infrastructure in place?
And it seems that what we have to do is really recondition their self-beliefs about themselves. Because what I've found is that, when we touched on something called absent father syndrome, I think you're very familiar, mashallah, with this subject, was that it's almost like, there's something that needs to be put in place. And what I found was it's about having that role model, all that belief that they can do something, and that's where I think, this is really effective. So, I mean, if there's a parent out there or a young person who, is really interested in this, wants to, engage with Deenagers, wants to get involved, what's the process?
Okay, we'll give you the contact number, which is 0121 416 0349.
One more time.
Okay, that's 0121 416 0349. And alternatively, you can email info@deenagers.com, and that's DEENAGERS.com.
Excellent. Okay, and who is this for? So ideally,
primarily it's 13 to 19-year-olds, Muslim youth, and also parents as well who want to get involved. There's going to be, throughout the year, inshallah, 2013, there's going to be a series of events and activities which we'll be putting on. And if you're someone out there who wants to get involved, we're looking for people who've got expertise. We're looking for people who've got commitment and drive. We're looking for people who've just got a passion about young people. And if any way you can support the program, it'll be widely kind of,
Yeah, excellent. And what are you going to be? What does the young person access then when
we're going to be doing traditional youth intervention.
It is male and female.
Yeah, male and female, but obviously, all the kind of checks and balances will be in place around, it's an Islamic.
No free mixing and.
I think. No, we're not going to. What our aim is to develop young people.
Yeah.
And
help them. Sorry to interrupt, but help them understand how to function in the working world, because in my experience recently, when I've entered the working world and I'm going into secondary schools and primary schools, not only am I an example or dawah to the non-Muslims, because it's their first interaction with a Muslim professional at that, but secondly, you have to observe in your head how you're going to behave in these environments, and stuff. So, sorry, is that what?
No, it's a very valid point. One of the is around, poor self-concept. This week we've seen Mo Farah, the Olympic, runner, being held, in the airport, suspicion of terrorism. Okay, now.
Really?
Exactly.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think what you have is a constant. Remember, there's another element to this. You have a constant barrage of negative media about young Muslims, about Muslims specifically.
That's such a shame, isn't it? I'm still in shock.
Okay. I'm more shocked that he didn't get a knighthood, but I mean, the reality is that through the media, it was initially through the black community. We was always portrayed negatively in the media. Now it's the turn of the Muslims. And, our young people absorb that, and they see it from a very young age, total negative blackout around our identity. And it's something that we will address. It's something that we will address. But for me, if we can just help one young person achieve his or her potential, then that for me, I'll be happy.
Now, I understand you've done some international work.
Yeah.
I wanted to touch on that because I think it's really important, the fact that, you've looked at how other countries are managing their young people.
Yeah.
Would you like to touch on that?
I looked at, about 18 months ago, I was in the Middle East, and I saw some of the work that they were doing there.
Right.
The issues obviously in the Middle East are a bit different, especially the Khalij or the Gulf states, because, as you know, finance isn't an issue like it is. I think a lot of their quote unquote antisocial behaviour is born out of boredom.
Right.
for being too comfortable.
Okay.
So they have massive issues around joyriding. There are drugs issues, but it's still another taboo subject.
Yeah.
And also employment, funny enough. But also, secondly, looking at other places in terms of, went to America a few months ago and looked at how essentially you can get a target-based, issue-based youth program and get it up and running.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the things that I looked at, how around message mastery and effective impact. That was one of the key things that I was looking at.
Excellent. I mean, you know, and obviously that has really helped you digest and put that into Deenagers, and I thought that was really important that you did that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we want a scenario where I think this thing around self-actualization, we shouldn't be looking to the local authority or the central government to support this. This is something that should be done in-house, you know, resourced by our own communities, and you know, so we can support our own young people. Remember something as well, the essentially the origin of youth work in Britain was born out of faith-based youth work. So Cubs, Scouts, you know, Girl Guides, Boys Brigade.
That was true,
it was an extension of the church.
Yeah.
So faith-based youth work is nothing new in this country. What happens now is people think that you know, it's got to be secular. It hasn't, because as I said, the origin of it is a faith-based approach. Why haven't we got the same structure? And you know, one of my biggest concerns is that we almost set up shop like a middle class type dawah. You know, we're prepared to take a hit on the most marginalised communities as long as we've got this kind of nice rose tinted view on our young people. No, you know, drugs is a problem. You know, underachievement at school is a problem. Being involved in the criminal justice system is a problem.
And unfortunately with drugs, I think, you know, the danger there is that the child or the young person can access them and can be doing it for a while and having this dependency, you know. I remember working with a bunch of young people who were smoking cannabis, and you could smell it, etc. And I said, you know, at the end of the day, when you go home and you shut the door, it's you and yourself that's on your own. And if you want to stand here and lie to me and tell me that you're happy, then that's fine. But you know the reality is that you're not happy. So rather than smoking your spliff, you need to pause, and if it means that you become expressive, put pen to paper, write a few rhymes to get it out. Because I think, you know, the workshops that I do in terms of, you know that I do the Nasheed workshops, is trying to engage them to get what's out onto paper and just get it out there in an expressive form. Because in essence, what you're not doing is you're not telling someone your problems. What you're doing is you're almost presenting them in a more cool way, you know. And, you know, funnily enough, I'd say maybe a few of those individuals came back and thanked me for not isolating them, but addressing them in a group. And they went home to digest what they'd done. And, you know, that was quite a few years back, you know. But really valid points what you're saying there, you know.
Yeah, you know, there's multiple issues out there. I think the drugs is always one that comes back, but also relationships. And, you know, one of the things I notice is the poor relationship between a young person and their father, even within our Muslim communities. Dad, specific, you know, breadwinner, working all the hours that Allah sends, but not realising that your children are growing up, not realising that it's more than just providing. Providing is important, but it's a holistic response to parenting that's important. And, you know, that old way of, as long as I bring home the halal bacon, to coin the phrase, then I'm doing my role. That's not it. Our young people need a lot more than just a breadwinner. They need someone who's a friend. They need someone who's a you know, a companion. You know,
and the thing is that if parents, because there are some single parent families there, you know, where mommy ends up being daddy, you know, have to overcome this fear of talking to their children about things that they think that their children haven't experienced. And as a parent, I had to take charge of, you know, helping my son understand how we function in this society.
Yeah, and you know, as I said, I get the calls about different issues, and I get, not because I'm any great youth worker, it's because maybe some people see me as someone as a sounding board, but I know there's some real good youth workers out there, better than me, who are they're not being used effectively, you know, who have a lot more skills and knowledge than myself, but have kind of fallen into this stewarding type of youth work. One I mentioned there about single parents. One of our aspirations is to run residentials for children who come from single Muslim families, you know, and so take a little bit of give mum a bit of respite, or in some cases, because there are some dads raising children as single fathers as well.
Yeah, really.
Giving them some respite, you know, just for those, because it's especially amongst the revert community, you're in a situation where you don't have the nuclear family, the wider family. You don't have a baradari, you don't have a qabila. You kind of have you and who else around you.
I touched on my Facebook the other day about the fact that I know so many women that are raising children on their own, and a lot of the fathers they're not very active in, you know, buying them clothes, taking them away, you know, and you know, they're not very active. So mommy ends up being daddy and whatever. So we got into this big debate anyway on the page.
I read it.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
What I did, I was going to comment, but I thought
you'd leave us girls to it.
No, I saw the gloves were off, so I thought I'm not even going to get involved. One of the things, though, I will say is that we know at the end of the day, whether you're Muslim or non-Muslim, life is about choices and decisions. And in terms of relationships, right? In terms of relationships, one of the key things is about who you choose as a partner. Whether that works or not is another thing. One of my biggest concerns is, because, you know, whether people are together or not is another issue, and that's another show for people who are more skilled. One of my concerns is, how does it affect the children? Because if they're grown up in a traumatic environment, you know, remember, they're going to grow up to be adults one day, and if they don't understand, you know, there's a famous saying, it's a beautiful saying, don't worry that children don't listen to everything you say, worry that they see everything you do.
Absolutely.
And that's the key fundamental thing for me. So post the divorce or post separation, what next? That's where I would say, well, that's where the energy needs to be. And, you know,
but I think the reason that I brought it up is because it touched on a very, you know, unlit family. Yes. Bless her. You know, she made a really valid point, and that is that, you know, when we look at broken families, we know that the riots, one of the statistics that came out was that majority of the children or people that were involved came from broken families. And, you know, I'm presuming that a lot of the you know, the Deenagers, or the, you know, that would come on it, need to have this addressed. And what I always try to do on the show is say that, you know, we're addressing Quran and Sunnah. We're explaining that if we practice it as a way of life, you know, and we go back to it, then we know how to raise our children. And we know that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam focused on the character of the child, you know. And I think that's really important, because the children of today, or the young people of today, if we discuss what we said earlier, they don't have the role models, because the role models themselves are confused. Unless they're the people that are responsible take accountability and pause and reflect and ponder on their own situations, then you're right. I mean, and interestingly, that riots is a good example of the power of faith. If you look at the statistics, 41% of the young people involved with the riots were under 18. Approximately a similar type of figure was BME, or Black Minority Ethnic. I would argue that
the amount of young Muslims involved was severely reduced because it was Ramadan. And because it was Ramadan, a lot of them, this is the power of faith. They didn't go out there and they didn't write. Some of them did, don't get me wrong. I met a guy recently who got 4 years. But he wasn't essentially, it was a spur of the moment thing for him. But for majority of Muslims weren't involved in it because it's hard to write when you've got Taraweeh. It's hard to write when you've been fasting all day.
Yeah.
This and this is the argument. If people have faith as a fundamental part of their life, certain things within the society will not affect them. It's very hard to sell crack cocaine if you're praying 5 times a day in the masjid. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not being naive here. Many Muslims are involved in selling drugs, but the way that Allah has blessed us with this deen is that the infrastructure is in place already that will not allow us, without thinking twice, to fall into certain things. Now, the masjid, you're right, should be an extension of the community, but they don't have the capacity to do it. And I'm not saying imams should roll up their sleeves and get involved. What I'm saying is a lot of those attendees of the masjid, the scope for you to get involved in Deenagers. Yeah, because it's your children.
And wouldn't that be excellent?
Exactly.
I mean, that would be fun. And that is almost them, bridging that understanding and taking away the wealth of knowledge that you're providing, a bunch of professionals, etc., and being able to deliver it, a dash of it, or have that understanding. Because I have Christian friends, and every Saturday my friend will go to church and she'll come back so revived, and and the children, they're playing with each other, and there's such strong sense of brotherhood, and and she knows her Bible inside out. She'll be quoting it inside out. Now, she's a good friend, and I just think that when I look at her daughter, when I look at her daughter, I think to myself, do you know what? The one thing that shines out of the daughter is, although they come from a broken family, they have the stability from their community. And, I just feel that young Muslims don't have that. And this is where I think Deenagers is. I hope I don't get loads of phone calls now. Well, actually, and forgive me if I'm wrong. And if there are organisations out there, then pick up the phone, let me know about it, and I'll gladly air you.
There are some great organisations out there, and there are some great youth workers out there, both Muslim and non-Muslim. However, what I would say is that we need to have a paradigm shift. And we need to kind of there's a lot of NGOs and charities across the UK who do some great work internationally. But my kind of final word is that there's some housekeeping for us to do, and some of the resources that you have need to be filtered towards dealing with local issues, national issues. Because it's not, when I go into a prison and I see a full-time imam on the wing in a thobe, the criminal justice system.
Really?
Yeah,
is that the reality?
The majority of prisons have got imams there. They've all got faith rooms, chapels and stuff.
Yeah.
So when you go there, the criminal justice system acknowledges faith as a method of rehabilitation. So when that young person gets released from prison, where's that extension of that? Do you know what I mean? So, I think now, and I'd be I'd be interested to hear some of the people's views about it. But I think where we are now is, you meant back to what you said earlier: consumerism, capitalism, secularism. Our young people are taking a battering. Eid. If it was Eid was a couple months ago, children don't want like we had Lego and Macan. They want iPhones and Blackberries. They want Uggs. They want
Tell me about
want Gucci bags.
Yeah,
no. Who is going to pay for it? And if you're not going to pay for it, mum or dad, they will find it, because the pressure to conform is massive on young people. You cannot turn up to school with no name as the trainers. It's not going to happen. But that £110 for those trainers, you may be able to hold it down with one of your children, but what about when you got 3 or 4 of them? Where's it going to come from? So it's more than just, you know, let's go on a camp and let's pray. It's more than just that. We're talking about giving them the tools to navigate within this society. So
it's open to parents, open to young people between the ages of 13 to 19. Get in touch. Telephone number
0121 416 0349.
Email
info@deenagers.com.
Okay, that's DEENAGERS.com. Excellent. Always a pleasure having you on the show. You have been on before and had to bring you back again. You know, you're doing so much within the community, mashallah. May Allah reward you. I mean, you know, and yes, you know, I'd like for you to come back really and tell us, you know, what the result is when it happens, and I'm sure there will be many things to come from it. Like you said, the residential item that you're looking to do for single parent families, you know, really important, you know, needed in the community. So right, so yeah, if you want to comment, please email the studio, and otherwise I will see you next week. Would you like to give your salams?
Shukran. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Okay, wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.